The stagecoach rattled into Nogales, Arizona, on a blistering afternoon in July of 1882, carrying the wrong person entirely. And Olivia Vaughn stood there with her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched a man step down instead of the bride she had ordered. She had scraped together every penny from running her late father's cattle ranch for the past 2 years, pouring her savings into an advertisement for a mail-order bride, because the ranch hands wouldn't take orders from a woman alone, and the neighboring ranchers kept circling like vultures, waiting for her to fail so they could snap up her land for nothing. A wife, she had reasoned in her desperation, would give her legitimacy. A woman running a ranch with another woman might seem eccentric, but at least it would be a household, a partnership that might keep the wolves at bay. But now a cowboy stood in the dust, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore worn leather chaps over denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. He looked around the small town square with an expression that shifted from confusion to understanding to something that might have been amusement, though he kept it carefully controlled. Olivia marched forward, her boots crunching on the hard, packed earth. She was 24 years old and had no patience left for setbacks. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her split riding skirt was dusty from the morning's work. She had left her foreman, Miguel, in charge so she could meet the stage, and now she had to go back and explain that the entire plan had fallen apart. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp. "Where is Olivia Morrison?" The cowboy turned to face her fully, and she saw that he was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 27 or 28. He had a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though he was not smiling now. He removed his hat, revealing slightly matted hair that spoke of long travel. "Madam," he said, and his voice was deep and rough like gravel, "I am afraid there has been some confusion. Olivia Morrison is my sister, and she sent me in her stead." Olivia felt the world tilt slightly. "Your sister?" "Yes, madam. My name is Samuel Zimmerman, and my sister asked me to come explain the situation in person." He held his hat in both hands, turning it slightly. "She got married 3 weeks ago to a merchant in Denver. Happened quite sudden." She felt terrible about backing out of the arrangement, but she did not know how to reach you in time, so she asked if I would come and deliver the news myself, and also to return your money. He reached into his vest and pulled out an envelope, which he extended toward her. Olivia stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. Around them, the few townspeople who had gathered to watch the stage's arrival were starting to whisper. She could feel their eyes on her, could practically hear their thoughts. Poor Olivia Vaughn, trying to buy herself a companion because no man would have her, could not even manage that successfully. "I see," she said, and her voice came out colder than she intended. She took the envelope without looking at it. "Thank you for making the journey. I am sure you are eager to catch the next stage back to wherever you came from." Something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. "Actually, madam, I was hoping we might talk. My sister told me about your situation, about the ranch. I am a cattleman myself, worked ranches from Texas to Montana. If you are looking for help, I would be willing to stay on as a ranch hand." "I have ranch hands," Olivia said quickly, too quickly. She saw his eyes assess her, saw him note the desperation she was trying to hide. "I am sure you do," he said mildly. "But my sister mentioned you were having some difficulties with neighboring ranchers. I have experience with that sort of thing as well." Olivia wanted to refuse him on principle. She wanted to send him away and pretend this entire humiliating episode had never happened. But she was also practical, and she knew that her situation was growing more dire by the day. "Just last week, Chester Dalton from the Double D Ranch had made another offer to buy her out, and when she refused, he had smiled in a way that made her skin crawl and said that she would come around eventually. "Walk with me," she said finally, and turned toward where her horse was hitched outside the general store. Samuel Zimmerman followed her, his boots thudding softly in the dust. He moved with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. When they reached her mare, a pretty chestnut named Rosie, he waited while she checked the girth strap, not offering to help unless asked. That small gesture of respect made her soften toward him slightly. "My father died 2 years ago," Olivia said without preamble. Heart gave out while he was checking the north fence line. He built the rocking V from nothing, started with 50 head of cattle and a dream. Now we run about 800 head on 2,000 acres. "That is a substantial operation," Samuel said. "It should be," Olivia replied. "But I have been bleeding money since father died. The hands respect me well enough, but the buyers will not deal with me directly. They go through my foreman, Miguel Reyes, and even then they try to cheat us. The other ranchers act like I am a temporary inconvenience, like I will pack up and leave any day now." She looked at him directly. "I will not leave. This is my home, my father's legacy, but I cannot hold it alone much longer." Samuel was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "What was your plan with my sister?" Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I thought that if I had a partner, another woman running the ranch with me, it might give me some stability. The townspeople might gossip, but they would leave us alone. And I thought Alina could handle the household accounts and deal with the buyers while I managed the cattle and the land." "That is a practical plan," Samuel said, surprising her. "Well, it does not matter now," Olivia said bitterly. "Your sister is married and I am back where I started." "Not exactly," Samuel said slowly. "Madam, I would like to make you a proposition." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I am listening." "Let me stay on as your foreman. Miguel can stay as segundo, second in command. I will work for room and board for the first month, no wages, so you can see what I am worth. If at the end of that month you want me to leave, I will go with no argument. But if I prove my value, we can discuss permanent terms." It was a generous offer, almost too generous. Olivia studied him, trying to understand his angle. "Why would you do that? You came all this way just to deliver a message. You do not owe me anything." "My sister felt terrible about letting you down," Samuel said. "And I have been drifting for the past year since my father passed and I sold our ranch in Kansas. I am tired of drifting. Your operation sounds like something I could be part of, something I could help build." He paused. "And I will be honest with you, madam. Alina told me about the neighboring ranchers trying to squeeze you out. That does not sit right with me. A woman should be able to run her own land without being harassed." Olivia wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe that help had arrived just when she needed it most. But she had learned to be cautious, to question fortune that seemed too good to be true. "1 month," she said finally. "But you answer to me, not to Miguel. I am the boss of the Rocking V, and that will not change." "I would not want it any other way," Samuel said, and he smiled for the first time. It transformed his face, made him look younger and more open. "Then get your things," Olivia said, turning to mount her horse. "The ranch is 6 miles south of town. You can ride double with me or walk." "I have a horse," Samuel said. "He is at the livery. Give me 5 minutes." He was back in 4, riding a sturdy bay gelding that looked as road-worn as its rider. They rode out of Nogales with the sun beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and amber. The saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the sky, and the air smelled of creosote and dust. Olivia did not talk much on the ride, and Samuel seemed content with the silence. He sat his horse well, his body moving in easy rhythm with the animal's gait. She found herself stealing glances at him, trying to assess what kind of man he was. His hands on the reins were steady and competent, scarred from work but not brutal. His profile was strong, with a straight nose and a firm chin. He looked like someone who had weathered storms and come through them intact. The rocking V appeared as they crested a low rise, and Olivia felt the familiar swell of pride and love in her chest. The ranch house was built of adobe and timber, with a wide porch that her father had added when she was 12. The barn was sturdy and well-maintained, and the corrals held a string of good horses. Beyond the immediate compound, she could see cattle grazing on the scrubland, dark shapes against the pale earth. Miguel Reyes came out of the barn as they rode up, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his 40s, with gray beginning to show in his black hair, and he had worked for Olivia's father since before she was born. His dark eyes went from Olivia to Samuel and back again, questions written plain on his weathered face. "Miguel, this is Samuel Zimmerman," Olivia said as she dismounted. "He will be staying on as a ranch hand. Can you show him to the bunkhouse and introduce him to the other men?" Miguel's expression remained neutral, but she saw the slight tension in his shoulders. "Of course." "Welcome to the Rocking V, Zimmerman." "Call me Samuel," the younger man said, swinging down from his horse. "And thank you. I am looking forward to working with you." Miguel nodded slowly, his eyes assessing Samuel the way he might assess a horse he was thinking of buying. "We will see how you work first. Come on, I will show you where to put your horse." As the two men walked toward the barn, leading their horses, Olivia went into the house. It was cooler inside, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. She set the envelope of money on the kitchen table without opening it and poured herself a glass of water from the pitcher. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she pressed them flat against the table until they steadied. She had gambled on a mail-order bride and ended up with a drifting cowboy instead. It should have felt like a disaster, but instead she felt a strange flutter of something that might have been hope. Samuel Zimmerman had looked her in the eye when he talked to her. He had not tried to take over or assume he knew better. He had asked for a chance to prove himself, and that was more respect than she had received from most men in the past 2 years. 1 month, she told herself. She would give him 1 month, and if he caused trouble or tried to undermine her authority, she would send him packing. But if he was genuine, if he really could help stabilize the ranch, then maybe Alina Morrison's broken promise had turned into an unexpected blessing. That night, Olivia made dinner for herself and the 6 ranch hands, as she did every evening. It was part of how she maintained her position, this nightly ritual of providing for the men who worked for her. Samuel joined them at the long table in the kitchen, sitting between Miguel and a young hand named Billy who could not have been more than 19. "Miss Vaughn is one of the best cooks in the territory," Billy said cheerfully, attacking his plate of beans and cornbread with enthusiasm. "You are in for a treat." "I can see that," Samuel said, and when his eyes met Olivia's across the table, there was approval in them that made warmth bloom in her chest. She looked away quickly, focusing on her own plate. She could not afford to think of Samuel Zimmerman as anything other than an employee. She had hired him to solve a problem, not to create new complications. But that night, lying in her bed with the windows open to catch the cool desert breeze, she found herself thinking about the way he had smiled when he agreed to work for her. She thought about his strong hands on the reins and the respect in his voice when he called her madam. She thought about how he had stood up for her to Miguel without even knowing her, simply because he believed it was right. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. He is an employee, nothing more, but her traitorous heart had already started to hope for something different. The next morning, Samuel was up before dawn, and when Olivia emerged from the house to start breakfast, she found him in the barn, already checking the horses' hooves and cleaning out stalls. "You are up early," she said from the doorway. He turned, and even in the dim light of the lantern, she could see the surprise on his face. "I could say the same about you. Most ranch owners I have known sleep until the work is done." "I am not most ranch owners," Olivia said, "and this is my ranch. I should know everything that happens on it." "Fair enough," Samuel said, returning to his work. "I was just getting a sense of your stock. You have good horses here. That gray mare in the corner looks like she has some Arabian blood in her." "That is Silver," Olivia said, moving into the barn. "Father bought her dam from a trader passing through, and the dam turned out to be in foal. Silver was born here on the ranch." She went to the mare's stall, and Silver nickered softly, pushing her nose against Olivia's palm. "She is my best cutting horse, I can imagine," Samuel said. "She has the look of intelligence about her." They worked in companionable silence for a while, Samuel finishing the stalls while Olivia fed the horses. The barn smelled of hay and horses and leather, familiar scents that always calmed her. When they finished, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, painting the mountains with shades of pink and purple. "What is on the schedule today?" Samuel asked as they walked back to the house. "We need to check the water sources on the eastern section," Olivia said. "It has been a dry summer, and some of the smaller springs might be running low. And we need to look over the herd, make sure none of them are showing signs of illness or injury." "I can handle that if you want," Samuel offered. "You probably have other business to attend to." Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Mr. Zimmerman, I am going to make something very clear. I do not sit in the house and do needlework while the men do the real work. I ride with my hands, I check my own cattle, and I make my own decisions. If you cannot accept that, we are going to have problems." Instead of looking offended, Samuel's face broke into a grin. "Good, I hate needlework." Despite herself, Olivia laughed. It surprised her, that sudden bubble of genuine amusement. She could not remember the last time someone had made her laugh. "Then we understand each other," she said, and continued toward the house. After breakfast, Olivia, Samuel, and Miguel rode out to check the eastern section of the ranch. The land here was rougher, with more rocks and scrub brush, but it held several natural springs that were vital for watering the cattle during the dry season. They rode in a loose formation, with Miguel leading the way along paths he knew by heart. Samuel rode beside Olivia, and she found herself acutely aware of his presence. He sat his horse like someone who had been born in the saddle, his body relaxed but alert, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. She noticed the way he took in everything around them, studying the land with the attention of someone who understood how to read it. "You have bobcat tracks here," he said at one point, nodding toward a sandy patch beside a rock outcropping. Olivia looked and saw the distinctive prints. "We lose a calf to them every now and then. Father used to hunt them, but I have not had the time." "I could take care of that if they become a problem," Samuel offered, "though they usually do not cause too much trouble if there is enough natural prey around." "There are plenty of jackrabbits and ground squirrels," Miguel said from ahead of them. "The cats mostly leave the cattle alone unless they are desperate." They reached the first spring around mid-morning. It was reduced to a trickle, the surrounding mud cracked and dry. Olivia dismounted and crouched beside it, her heart sinking. This was one of the larger springs, and if it was running this low, the smaller ones were probably already dry. "We need to move the cattle that graze in this section closer to the main water source," she said, standing and brushing the dust off her split skirt. "Otherwise we will lose them." "That will mean more crowding near the ranch," Miguel said with a frown. We are already running close to capacity there. I know, Olivia said, but what choice do we have? We cannot let them die of thirst out here. Samuel was studying the landscape, his eyes narrowed in thought. How far north does your property extend? About 3 miles from here, Olivia said. It runs up to the base of those mountains. And what is your water situation up there? Olivia exchanged a glance with Miguel. There is a creek that runs down from the mountains. It flows year-round, even in dry years, but the land up there is rougher, harder to manage cattle on. But if the water is reliable, it might be worth it, Samuel said. Better to deal with rough land than no water at all. We tried running cattle up there when I was younger, Olivia said. Father said it was too difficult, that we lost too many to the terrain and predators. Times change, Samuel said. And right now, you need that water. If we build some better fencing, clear some paths, it could work. Olivia wanted to dismiss the idea out of hand, wanted to say that if her father could not make it work, then it was impossible. But she was also desperate, and Samuel's suggestion made a certain amount of sense. We would need supplies, she said slowly. Fence posts, wire, that costs money. Not as much as replacing dead cattle, Samuel pointed out. He was right, and she knew it. All right. We will ride up there this afternoon and take a look. If it seems feasible, we will start planning. They checked the other springs in the eastern section, and all of them were running low or completely dry. By the time they headed back toward the ranch for lunch, Olivia's mood was grim. The drought was worse than she had realized, and moving the cattle was going to be a massive undertaking. But Samuel seemed energized by the challenge. As they rode, he talked through logistics, suggesting ways to move the herd efficiently and safely. He asked intelligent questions about the ranch's layout and resources, and Olivia found herself responding, sharing information she had kept close out of habit. There was something about his manner that invited confidence, a straightforward competence that made her want to trust him. After a quick lunch of cold chicken and bread, the three of them rode north toward the mountains. The land grew steadily rougher, with more rocks and steeper slopes. Mesquite and juniper replaced the lower scrub, and the air smelled different here, sharper and greener. The creek was exactly where Olivia remembered it, a ribbon of clear water tumbling down through a rocky canyon, before spreading out into a wider, gentler stream in the flatter land below. The banks were lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling in the breeze, and the grass here was greener and more lush than anywhere else on the ranch. "This is good land," Samuel said, dismounting and crouching beside the creek. He dipped his hand in the water and tasted it. "Good water, too, not too alkaline. You could support a couple hundred head up here easily." "If we can manage them," Olivia said, but she was beginning to see the potential. The canyon would provide natural shelter from storms, and the trees would offer shade during the hottest part of summer. We would need to fence off the most dangerous areas, keep the cattle from wandering into places where they could get trapped or injured. "That is doable," Samuel said. "It will take time and work, but it is doable." Miguel had been silent, studying the land with his experienced eye. Now he nodded slowly. "It could work. We would need to clear a better trail for bringing the cattle up, and we would need to check on them more regularly. But yes, it could work." Coming from Miguel, that was high praise. Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Then we start tomorrow." "Samuel, can you ride into town and order the supplies we will need? Miguel, you and I will start mapping out where we need to fence." "Yes, madam," they said in unison. And Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for these men who were willing to work beside her, who took her orders seriously and treated her like the boss she was. That evening after dinner, Olivia sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She heard the screen door open behind her, and a moment later, Samuel stepped out onto the porch. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It is a free country," Olivia said, then softened. "Please sit." He settled into the chair beside hers, holding his own cup of coffee. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the chirp of crickets and the distant yip of coyotes. "Thank you for today," Olivia said finally. "For the suggestion about the northern range, I should have thought of it myself." "You have a lot on your mind," Samuel said. "Sometimes it takes a fresh set of eyes to see new possibilities. Still, it was a good idea." "We will see if it works," Samuel said with a slight smile. "Do not thank me until the cattle are fat and happy on that mountain grass." Olivia found herself smiling back. Fair enough. Another comfortable silence fell between them. Olivia was surprised by how easy it was to be quiet with Samuel, how she did not feel the need to fill the space with conversation. She had spent so much of the past 2 years on guard, defending herself and her choices, that this simple peace felt like a luxury. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said after a while. "You can ask. I might not answer," he chuckled softly. "Fair enough. Why did your father never teach you to run the ranch before he died? It sounds like you have had to learn everything the hard way." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, deciding how much to share. "He taught me," she said finally. "Everything I know about cattle and horses and land management I learned from him, but he never expected me to have to run the place on my own. He thought I would get married, that my husband would take over the ranch. But you did not get married." "No," Olivia said simply. "There were some local boys who came courting when I was younger, but they did not want me, not really. They wanted the ranch, and I would rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as a means to an end." "That is understandable," Samuel said. "For what it is worth, you are doing a good job. Running a ranch this size alone would break most people, man or woman. The fact that you have held on for 2 years says a lot about your strength." Olivia felt unexpected tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. "I am not alone. I have Miguel and the hands. But the weight of it is on your shoulders," Samuel said gently. "That is a different thing." He was right, and the fact that he understood made something crack open in Olivia's chest. She had been carrying this burden alone for so long, pretending to be stronger than she felt, that having someone acknowledge the difficulty of it was almost overwhelming. "Why did you really come here?" she asked, changing the subject to safer ground. "You said you have been drifting for a year. Why stop here?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkness. "My father and I had a falling out about 6 months before he died. He wanted me to sell the ranch and move to the city, said the cattle business was dying. I refused, said I would never leave. We argued, said things we did not mean." He paused, his jaw tight. "He died before we could make it right. I sold the ranch after that because I could not stand to be there without him, knowing we had parted on bad terms. But selling it did not help. I just felt lost. And now?" Olivia asked softly. "Now I am trying to find a place where I can do some good," Samuel said. "When Alina told me about your situation, it felt like maybe this was where I was supposed to be. A chance to help someone hold onto what they love instead of losing it." He looked at her, and in the dim light from the house, his eyes were serious. "I know 1 month is not much time, but I want you to know I am serious about this. I am not going to let you down." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The intensity in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes, made her heart beat faster. "I believe you," she said, and realized it was true. They sat together on the porch until the coffee was gone and the night had turned cold, talking about ranching and the territory and their lives before this moment. Olivia learned that Samuel was 27, that he had grown up in Kansas on his father's ranch, that he could play the harmonica but not very well, and that he had once punched a man for insulting a woman in a saloon. In turn, she told him about growing up on the rocking V, about learning to ride before she could properly walk, about the time she had fallen into a creek chasing a runaway calf and her father had laughed so hard he cried while pulling her out. She told him things she had not shared with anyone, and it felt good, like lancing a wound and letting the poison drain out. When they finally said goodnight and went to their separate beds, Olivia lay awake for a long time, her mind refusing to settle. Samuel Zimmerman was dangerous, she realized. Not in the way Chester Dalton was dangerous, with his threats and his covetous eyes. Samuel was dangerous because he made her want things she had convinced herself she could not have. Things like partnership and understanding and maybe, if she was very brave, something more. But it had only been one day, she reminded herself. One day, and he was here for only a month. She needed to focus on the ranch, on securing her future. She could not afford to let her heart get tangled up with a drifting cowboy, no matter how kind his eyes or how warm his smile. She fell asleep telling herself that, but her dreams were full of storm-gray eyes and the sound of his voice saying her name. The next morning, Samuel rode into Nogales to order supplies while Olivia and Miguel began the work of planning the northern range. They spent hours walking the land, marking out where fences would go and where they would need to clear paths. It was hot, exhausting work, but Olivia threw herself into it with determination, trying to ignore the little voice in her head that kept wondering when Samuel would return. He came back in the late afternoon, his horse loaded with some basic supplies and the promise that the rest would be delivered within a week. He also brought news from town. Chester Dalton was at the general store, he said, as he unsaddled his bay gelding. He asked me who I was and what I was doing at the rocking V. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. What did you tell him? That I was a new ranch hand and it was none of his business, Samuel said calmly. He did not like that much, said he would be keeping an eye on me. Chester Dalton is a snake, Miguel said, spitting into the dust. He has been trying to get his hands on this ranch since Senor Vaughn died. He thinks a woman cannot run it properly. Then he is a fool, Samuel said. From what I have seen, Miss Vaughn runs this place better than half the men I have worked for. The compliment made Olivia flush with pleasure, but she kept her voice steady. Dalton is not just ignorant, he is dangerous. Do not underestimate him. I do not plan to, Samuel said. But I also do not plan to let him intimidate me or you. Over the following weeks, Samuel proved himself to be everything Olivia had hoped for and more. He worked harder than any hand she had ever employed, often starting before dawn and finishing after dark. He was good with the cattle, patient with the horses, and respectful to every person on the ranch. The other hands quickly accepted him, even Billy, who had been suspicious at first of this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. More than that, Samuel had a gift for solving problems. When they encountered a section of the trail to the northern range that was too steep for the cattle to navigate safely, he rigged a system of ropes and pulleys to ease their passage. When one of the older hands, a man named Frank, injured his back, Samuel took over his duties without complaint and spent his evenings teaching Billy some basic veterinary care so they would have backup in case of future emergencies. And through it all, Olivia found herself growing more and more drawn to him. She noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he lifted fence posts, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way he always seemed to know when she needed help without her having to ask. She noticed how gentle he was with the animals, how he talked to them in a low, soothing voice that made even the most skittish horse calm down. She noticed, and she tried desperately not to care. But it was hard not to care when he brought her coffee in the morning exactly the way she liked it. or when he insisted she take a break on the hottest days, or when he asked her opinion on every decision and actually listened to her answer. It was hard not to care when he looked at her like she was the most capable person he had ever met, like her being a woman had nothing to do with her worth. 3 weeks into his employment, they finished fencing the northern range and began the process of moving cattle up from the drying eastern section. It was grueling work that required all hands on deck, and they started before dawn to take advantage of the cooler morning temperatures. Olivia rode Silver, using the mare's cutting skills to keep the cattle moving in the right direction. Samuel rode beside her on his bay, working in perfect synchronization with her movements. They had developed an almost wordless communication, able to anticipate each other's actions and respond accordingly. Miguel led from the front, with the other hands spread out along the flanks of the herd. They were about halfway to the northern range when one of the young bulls decided to make a break for it. He was a big Hereford, stubborn and strong, and he crashed through the line of cattle with his head down, heading for open range. Olivia reacted instinctively, wheeling Silver around and giving chase. The mare stretched out beneath her, racing across the rough ground with sure-footed grace. Olivia leaned low over her neck, her braid flying behind her, focused entirely on the fleeing bull. She did not see the prairie dog hole until Silver's front leg went into it. The mare stumbled, and Olivia felt herself flying forward over Silver's head. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment she could not breathe, could not move, could only lie there gasping like a fish out of water. Then Samuel was there, sliding out of his saddle before his horse had fully stopped. He dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale under his tan. "Olivia, are you hurt? Can you breathe?" She managed to drag in a wheezing breath, then another. "Fine," she gasped. "Wind knocked out." "Do not move," Samuel ordered. His hands moved over her carefully, checking for broken bones with a competence that spoke of experience. "Does anything hurt? Your head, your back?" "My pride," Olivia managed, and was rewarded by a flash of relief in his eyes. "That will heal," he said, but he did not smile. "Can you sit up slowly?" With his help, she managed to get upright. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed broken. She looked around for Silver and saw the mare standing a few yards away, favoring her front right leg. "Silver," she said, trying to stand. Samuel's hands on her shoulders kept her down. "Miguel is checking her. You stay still until we are sure you are all right." Miguel had indeed caught Silver and was running his hands down her leg, his expression grim. After a moment, he looked up and shook his head. "She is lame, but I do not think it is broken. She must have tweaked it in the hole." Relief flooded through Olivia, followed quickly by guilt. Silver was hurt because of her recklessness, her need to prove she could handle everything on her own. "I am sorry, girl," she called to the mare, and Silver whickered softly in response. Samuel helped Olivia to her feet, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow. "Can you ride?" "Of course I can ride," Olivia said, but when she took a step, pain shot through her left ankle and she stumbled. Samuel caught her easily. "That is what I thought. You are riding back with me." "I am fine," Olivia protested. "I just twisted it slightly." "You are riding back with me," Samuel repeated, and there was steel in his voice now. "Miguel can handle the rest of the move. Your ankle needs to be looked at, and Silver needs rest." Olivia wanted to argue, but she could see the concern in Samuel's eyes, the genuine worry. And truth be told, her ankle was throbbing, and the thought of making it all the way to the northern range and back was daunting. "All right," she said finally. "But just back to the ranch. I am not an invalid." Samuel's expression softened. "I know you are not. But even the strongest people need help sometimes." He lifted her onto his horse as easily as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Olivia found herself cocooned in his warmth, surrounded by the smell of leather and soap and something uniquely him. Her heart was racing, and she told herself it was from the fall, not from his proximity. Miguel led Silver carefully, and they rode back to the ranch at an easy walk. Billy offered to ride ahead and fetch the doctor from town, but Olivia refused. "It is just a twist. Some ice and rest and it will be fine." Once at the ranch, Samuel carried her into the house despite her protests and settled her on the sofa in the front room. He propped her foot up on a cushion and wrapped her ankle in strips of cloth soaked in cold water from the well. "Stay off it for at least a day," he ordered. "And if it is not better by tomorrow, I am getting the doctor whether you like it or not." "You are very bossy for an employee," Olivia said, but there was no heat in it. "Someone has to be," Samuel replied. "You would work yourself to death if given the chance." He was right, and they both knew it. Olivia leaned back against the cushions, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the fall was wearing off, leaving her shaky and sore. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for taking care of me." Samuel's expression softened. "Anytime." He hesitated, then added, "You scared me out there. When I saw you go down, I thought—" He stopped, shook his head. "Just please be more careful." The raw emotion in his voice made Olivia's breath catch. "I will," she promised. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Olivia saw the truth written plain on Samuel's face, the feelings he had been keeping carefully hidden. And she knew he could see the same thing in her eyes, the attraction she had been trying to deny. "Samuel," she said softly, but she did not know how to finish the sentence. "I should check on Silver," Samuel said abruptly, standing up. "You rest. I will bring you some dinner later." He was gone before she could respond, leaving Olivia alone with her racing thoughts and aching heart. Over the next few days, Olivia was forced to rest while her ankle healed. It was torture for someone who was used to constant activity, and she spent her time pacing the house, limited as that was, and watching through the windows as the work of the ranch continued without her. Samuel checked on her multiple times a day, bringing her meals and reports on how things were progressing. The cattle had been successfully moved to the northern range, he told her, and they were already showing signs of thriving on the better grass and reliable water. Silver's leg was healing well, though she would need more time before she could be ridden again. "You are doing a good job keeping things running," Olivia said on the third day of her confinement when Samuel came in with lunch. "Miguel deserves most of the credit," Samuel said, setting the tray on the table beside the sofa. "I am just following his lead." "Do not be modest," Olivia said. "The hands tell me you have been working harder than anyone." Samuel shrugged. "I like to earn my keep." Olivia studied him, this man who had wandered into her life by accident and was now becoming essential to it. His month was almost up, she realized with a jolt. Another week, and by their original agreement, he would be free to leave. The thought of him leaving made her chest tight with panic. "Samuel," she said carefully, "have you thought about what you want to do after your trial month is over?" He looked at her, and there was something unreadable in his eyes. "I have thought about it. And I would like to stay if you will have me," he said. "I like it here. The work, the land, the people." His gaze held hers. "Everything about it." Olivia's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I would like you to stay too, as foreman officially, with proper wages." "I would be honored," Samuel said quietly. They stared at each other, and Olivia knew they were talking about more than just employment. But neither of them was brave enough to say it aloud, to acknowledge the feelings that were growing stronger every day. "Good," Olivia said finally, breaking the eye contact. "That is settled then." "Good," Samuel echoed, and if there was disappointment in his voice, he hid it well. By the end of the week, Olivia's ankle was mostly healed, and she was able to return to light work. Samuel remained watchful, ready to step in if she pushed too hard, but he did not try to stop her from resuming her duties. He understood that the ranch was more than just her livelihood. It was her identity, and taking that away from her would be a cruelty. On a Saturday morning in early August, Chester Dalton rode up to the ranch house with two of his hands flanking him like hired guns. Olivia was in the barn when they arrived, and she came out to meet them with her chin up and her shoulders back, refusing to show any fear. "Mr. Dalton," she said coolly, "what brings you to the Rocking V?" Chester Dalton was a big man, running to fat in his middle age, with cold blue eyes and a mouth that turned down naturally at the corners. He looked Olivia up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. "I heard you hired yourself a new foreman," he said. "Thought I would come see for myself what kind of man would work for a woman." "A smart one," Samuel said, emerging from the barn behind Olivia. He moved to stand beside her, not in front of her but beside her, a unified front. "Miss Vaughn runs an excellent operation." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "You are the drifter from Kansas. I have been asking around about you. Seems your daddy died and you sold out, ran away from your responsibilities." Samuel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I sold because there was no reason to stay. Here I have a reason." "And what reason is that?" Dalton asked. "You planning to marry the girl, take over the ranch for yourself?" "That is none of your business," Olivia snapped before Samuel could respond. "Now, if you have no legitimate reason for being here, I would appreciate it if you left my property." Dalton's smile was unpleasant. "I am being neighborly, Miss Vaughn. Came to tell you that I am willing to raise my offer for your land by 10%. That is a fair price, more than fair considering how you have been struggling." "I am not struggling," Olivia said, "and the ranch is not for sale at any price." "You say that now," Dalton said, "but the summer is not over. That drought is going to get worse before it gets better. And when your cattle start dying, when you cannot pay your hands, you will come around to my way of thinking." "Or," Samuel said quietly, dangerously, "she will continue to thrive because she is smart enough to plan ahead and adapt. We have already moved the cattle to better grazing land with reliable water. The Rocking V will be fine." Dalton's face reddened. "You have no idea what you are getting into, boy. This territory is not kind to women who do not know their place." "Good thing Miss Vaughn knows exactly what her place is," Samuel said. "Right here, running her ranch." For a moment, Olivia thought Dalton might actually attack Samuel. The older man's face was purple with rage and his hands clenched into fists. But then he seemed to master himself, and his expression smoothed into something uglier than anger, something calculating. "We will see how long your loyalty lasts," he said to Samuel. "When the money runs out and she cannot pay you, you will drift on like you always do. And when that happens, I will be here to pick up the pieces." He wheeled his horse around and rode off with his men trailing behind him. Olivia watched them go, her hands trembling with suppressed fury. "That man is poison," Samuel said beside her. "I know," Olivia said, "but what can I do?" "He has not done anything illegal, and he is careful to make his threats vague enough that I cannot go to the law. We just have to make sure the ranch succeeds," Samuel said. "If the Rocking V thrives, he has no leverage." "And if it does not?" Olivia asked quietly. Samuel turned to face her, and his eyes were fierce. "It will. I promise you, Olivia, we will make this work." It was the first time he had used her given name outside of when she was hurt, and the sound of it on his lips sent warmth flooding through her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing with me." "Always," Samuel said, and she believed him. August melted into September, and the drought continued. Other ranches in the area began to suffer, with cattle dying from lack of water and grass. But the Rocking V thrived. The northern range provided everything the herd needed, and the cooler temperatures in the mountains meant the cattle were healthier and stronger than they had been in months. Word spread through the territory about Olivia's success, and she started to get respect she had never received before. Buyers who had refused to deal with her directly now sought her out, wanting access to her prime beef. Other ranchers, seeing what she had accomplished, began to treat her like an equal rather than an oddity, and through it all, Samuel was by her side. He had become more than just her foreman. He was her partner in every meaningful way, the person she turned to when she needed advice, the person whose opinion she valued most. They worked together seamlessly, their skills complementing each other perfectly. But they remained carefully professional, maintaining a distance that was becoming harder and harder to justify. Olivia knew she was falling in love with him, if she had not already fallen. She saw it in the way her heart leaped when he walked into a room, in the way she found excuses to stand close to him, in the way his smile could make her entire day brighter, and she was fairly certain he felt the same way. She saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, in the way he always seemed to know what she needed, in the way he said her name like it was something precious. But neither of them made a move to change their relationship. Olivia told herself it was because she did not want to complicate their working partnership. Samuel seemed content to follow her lead, to wait for some signal that she was ready for more. It was Miguel who finally forced the issue. They were sitting around the kitchen table one evening in late September, going over the books. The ranch had turned a profit for the first time since Olivia's father died, and they were celebrating with a bottle of whiskey Miguel had been saving for a special occasion. "You did it, Miss Vaughn," Miguel said, raising his glass. "You saved the ranch." "We did it," Olivia corrected, clinking her glass against his. "I could not have done it without you and Samuel and all the hands." "Mostly Samuel," Miguel said, and there was a knowing look in his eye. "He has been good for this place, good for you." Olivia felt her cheeks heat. "He is an excellent foreman." "He is more than that, and you know it," Miguel said bluntly. "I am an old man, Miss Vaughn, and I have seen many things. I have seen the way you two look at each other. The way you light up when he walks into a room. The way he watches you like you are the sun and he is a flower growing toward you." "Miguel," Olivia protested weakly. "Your father, God rest his soul, wanted you to be happy," Miguel continued. "He would have liked Samuel, would have approved of him." Olivia's eyes stung with sudden tears. "But what if I am wrong? What if I let myself love him and he leaves? I have lost so much already. I do not know if I can survive losing him too." Miguel reached across the table and patted her hand. "Love is always a risk, Majida. But some risks are worth taking, and I do not think Samuel is going anywhere. That man is here to stay if you will let him." That night, Olivia lay in bed and thought about Miguel's words. She thought about Samuel and how he had become essential to her life. She thought about the way her heart raced when he smiled at her, the way she felt safe and understood in his presence. She thought about her father and what he would want for her, and she made a decision. The next morning was Sunday, and the ranch operated on a lighter schedule. After breakfast, Olivia found Samuel in the barn, checking on Silver, who had fully recovered from her injury. "Can we talk?" Olivia asked. Samuel looked up, and something in her expression made him immediately attentive. "Of course. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Olivia said. "I just need to say something, and I need you to let me say it all before you respond." Concern flickered across his face, but he nodded. "All right." Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When you first arrived here, I thought you were a mistake. I thought you were a complication I did not need, but I was wrong. You have been the best thing that has happened to this ranch to me in years." She paused, her heart hammering. "You are smart and kind and hardworking, and you treat me like an equal. You make me laugh and you make me feel capable and strong, and somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." Samuel's eyes widened, but he stayed silent, letting her finish. "I know this complicates things," Olivia continued. "I know it changes our working relationship. And if you do not feel the same way, we can pretend I never said anything and go on as we were. But Miguel told me last night that some risks are worth taking, and I think you are worth the risk. So I am asking, plain and simple, do you have feelings for me too?" For a moment, Samuel just stared at her, and Olivia felt her heart sink. She had been wrong. She had misread the signs, and now she had made everything awkward and awful. And then Samuel crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and passionate, months of pent-up longing released in a single moment. His hands came up to cup her face, and Olivia's fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer. She felt like she was drowning and being saved at the same time, like every nerve in her body had suddenly come alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I have been in love with you since the day I arrived," he said roughly. "I saw you standing in that dusty town square, looking so fierce and determined, and I thought you were the most magnificent thing I had ever seen. Every day since then has only made me love you more. You are brave and strong and brilliant, and I would do anything for you. Anything." Olivia laughed, and it came out half like a sob. "Why did you not say anything?" "Because I did not want you to think I was another man trying to take over your ranch," Samuel said. "I did not want you to doubt my motives or feel pressured. I wanted you to be sure that what we had was real." "It is real," Olivia said, kissing him again, softer this time. "It is very real." They stood in the barn, holding each other for a long time. Silver watched them with patient eyes, and somewhere outside, a mockingbird sang its complicated song. Olivia felt like her heart might burst with happiness, like all the fear and uncertainty of the past 2 years had been worth it because it had led her to this moment, to this man. "So what now?" Samuel asked eventually. Olivia pulled back to look at him, and she was grinning. "Now we run this ranch together, as partners, as equals." "I would like that," Samuel said. "But Olivia, I want more than just a working partnership. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, a family. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to be yours completely." Tears were streaming down Olivia's face now, but she was smiling. Yes, yes to all of it. Samuel kissed her again, and this time it was slow and sweet, a promise of all the days to come. They were married in October, in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Miguel standing up as Samuel's best man and Billy's mother, who had come from town, serving as Olivia's matron of honor. The weather was perfect, cool and clear, with the mountains standing sharp against the blue sky. Olivia wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, and Samuel wore his best suit, and they said their vows with the entire ranch staff watching and cheering. Chester Dalton, hearing the news, made one last attempt to buy the ranch, this time approaching Samuel directly and suggesting that now that he had married into property, he would surely want to cash in. Samuel's response was short and profane enough that Dalton never bothered them again. The ranch continued to prosper. With Samuel's help, Olivia expanded their operation, buying more land to the north and increasing their herd. They developed a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing, and buyers came from as far away as California to purchase their stock. But the real joy was in the small moments. It was in the way Samuel brought Olivia coffee in the morning and kissed the top of her head. It was in the way they rode out together to check the herd, their hands occasionally brushing, their eyes meeting in shared understanding. It was in the way they sat on the porch in the evenings, talking about their day, planning for the future, simply enjoying each other's company. It was in the way Samuel looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and the way Olivia no longer felt like she was carrying the weight of the ranch alone. In the spring of 1883, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one morning as they were getting ready to ride out, and he responded by picking her up and spinning her around, whooping with joy loud enough to startle the horses. "Careful," Olivia laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "You are going to jostle the baby." "The baby is fine," Samuel said, but he set her down gently and pressed his hand to her still flat stomach with wonder in his eyes. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Olivia confirmed, and they grinned at each other like fools. Their son was born in December, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him James, after Olivia's father, and Samuel cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with gratitude for this new life they had created. Olivia watched her husband cradle their child, and she thought about how different her life was from what she had imagined 2 years ago. She had been so alone then, so desperate and afraid. She had thought she needed a mail-order bride to save her ranch, but what she had needed was a partner, someone who would stand beside her and fight for what they were building together. Samuel Zimmerman had stepped off that stagecoach by accident, but he had stayed by choice. He had stayed because he saw something in her worth staying for, and because she had been brave enough to take a risk on him. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, looking up from the baby to smile at her. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Olivia said. "How everything worked out exactly as it should have." "We make our own luck," Samuel said, but his smile was soft and full of love. "And I am the luckiest man alive." The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The Rocking V continued to grow, becoming one of the most successful ranches in southern Arizona. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose in 1885 and another son named Thomas in 1887. The children grew up wild and happy, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, running through the ranch like they owned it, which in a way they did. Miguel stayed on as segundo until he was too old to ride, and then he retired to a little house on the ranch property that Samuel and Olivia built for him. Billy grew into a fine hand and eventually became foreman when Samuel stepped back to focus more on the business side of the operation. The ranch became a family in the truest sense, a place where people were valued and respected and given room to grow. Olivia never forgot the fear and desperation of those years before Samuel arrived, but she also did not let them define her. She had fought for what was hers, and she had won. More than that, she had found love in the process, a deep and abiding love that only grew stronger with time. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised her by presenting her with a deed. She unfolded it, confused, and then gasped when she saw what it was. "You bought the northern range," she said, looking up at him in shock. It was the land adjacent to their property, 1,000 acres of prime grazing land that she had always dreamed of owning. "We bought it," Samuel corrected. "I used some of the profits from last year's sale. I know you have been eyeing it for a while." Olivia threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over. "You are impossible. I love you so much." "I love you too," Samuel said, holding her close. "Everything I have, everything I am, is yours. It has been since the day I stepped off that stagecoach and saw you standing there, looking like you were ready to take on the world." "I was ready to take on the world," Olivia said. "I just did not know I was going to do it with you." "Best mistake you ever made," Samuel teased. "Best mistake I ever made," Olivia agreed, and kissed him there in the parlor of the house they had built together, with their children's laughter echoing from the yard, and the ranch spread out around them like a promise kept. They grew old together on the rocking V, watching their children grow and have children of their own. They saw the territory change around them, saw Arizona become a state in 1912, saw the wild frontier of their youth become settled and civilized. But the ranch remained, a constant in a changing world, a testament to what could be built with hard work and determination and love. And every year on the anniversary of the day Samuel had arrived, Olivia would take his hand and lead him out to the porch where they had first admitted their feelings for each other. They would sit in the chairs they had sat in decades before, older now and grayer but no less in love, and they would watch the sun set over the land they had fought so hard to keep. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked one evening when they were both well into their 60s. "Coming here instead of your sister, giving up your freedom to tie yourself to a stubborn woman and a struggling ranch." Samuel looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that still made her heart skip a beat, even after all these years. "Not for a single second. You and this ranch and our family are the best things that ever happened to me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where Chester Dalton tried to run us out, especially that part," Samuel said with a grin. "I enjoyed proving him wrong." Olivia laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did prove him wrong, did not we? We proved everyone wrong," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "They all said a woman could not run a ranch, could not hold onto her land. But you did. You built something remarkable here, Olivia. Something that will last long after we are gone." "We built it," Olivia corrected. "Together." "Together," Samuel agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance they could hear the lowing of cattle and the whinny of horses. The sounds of the ranch, the sounds of home. Olivia thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and afraid, placing an advertisement for a mail-order bride because she could not see any other way forward. She thought about how she had stood in that dusty town square, waiting for salvation in the form of a woman she had never met, only to have a cowboy step off the stagecoach instead. She thought about how that cowboy had tipped his hat and smiled and asked for a chance to prove himself. How he had worked beside her and believed in her when no one else did. How he had loved her fierce independence instead of trying to tame it. How he had given her everything she needed without asking her to give up who she was. She thought about all the years since then, the struggles and the triumphs, the children and the grandchildren, the ranch that had grown from a struggling operation into a thriving enterprise. She thought about Miguel and Billy and all the people who had become family over the years. She thought about Chester Dalton, long since dead, and how sweet it had been to outlast him and prove him wrong. But mostly, she thought about the man beside her, the man who had stayed when he could have left, who had chosen her over and over again every day for more than 30 years. The man who still looked at her like she was the most magnificent thing he had ever seen. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Samuel replied, taking her hand in his. "From the moment I saw you until the day I die and every day after that, if there is such a thing." They sat together on the porch as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other by accident and stayed together by choice, watching over the land they had built into something beautiful. The ranch would go on, passing to their children and their children's children, but the real legacy was this: love and partnership and the courage to fight for what mattered. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and constant, and in the house behind them their grandchildren slept safely, dreaming of horses and cattle and wide open spaces. The rocking V had survived drought and threats, and every obstacle the world could throw at it. And it would continue to survive because it had been built on something stronger than just hard work or determination. It had been built on love, the kind of love that showed up when it was needed most, that stayed even when things got hard, that grew deeper and stronger with every passing year. The kind of love that transformed two lonely people into a partnership that could weather any storm. And it had all started with a mistake, a wrong person stepping off a stagecoach on a hot July day in 1882. But as Olivia had learned, sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming, the ones that arrived when you least expected them and changed everything for the better. Samuel squeezed her hand gently, and Olivia squeezed back. A silent conversation between two people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. The night was cool and peaceful, and the ranch was quiet around them, and there was nowhere else in the world that either of them wanted to be. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And it was more than either of them had ever dared to dream of, more beautiful and more meaningful than anything they could have planned. Because the best love stories, Olivia thought as she smiled in the darkness, were the ones that started with someone tipping their hat and asking for a chance, and ended with a lifetime of moments just like this one, sitting together and grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them to this place. Samuel had stepped off that stagecoach all those years ago, and he had never left. He had stayed through drought and difficulty, through joy and sorrow, through all the messy, beautiful complications of building a life together. He had stayed because she was worth staying for, and she had loved him for it every single day since. And as they sat on the porch of the ranch, they had saved and built and grown together, with their family sleeping peacefully nearby and the stars shining overhead, and the land stretching out around them in the darkness. Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about how their story had unfolded. She had sent for a bride, but a groom had stepped off the stage. The cowboy had tipped his hat and stayed. And in staying, he had given her everything she never knew she needed: partnership, love, and a lifetime of moments exactly like this one. It was, she thought as Samuel's fingers intertwined with hers, the very best kind of happy ending. The kind that was really just a beginning, repeated over and over again with every choice to stay, to love, to build something beautiful together. And it all started with a dusty town square, a confused cowboy, and a woman brave enough to take a chance on the unexpected. Sometimes, Olivia had learned, the wrong person turns out to be exactly the right one after all.